Welcome. Today, we are cracking the code on one of the most, let's be honest, misunderstood parts of our diet, carbohydrates. So whether you're studying for a big exam or you just want to finally get what you're eating, you are in the right place. Trust me, by the end of this, you are going to see carbs in a whole new light. So let's get into it.
So let's kick things off with a little riddle. What one thing in our diet can power you through a brutal workout, help figure out your actual blood type, and keep your joints from getting all creaky? The answer might surprise you. It's carbohydrates. Yeah, they do so much more than we give them credit for.
So, here's our game plan. We're going to start with the absolute basics, the building blocks. Then we'll see how those blocks build up into simple and complex carbs. We'll dive into the glycemic index, which can be super confusing. Then we'll look at fiber, and finally, we'll become nutrition label detectives. It's going to be great.
Okay, first up, the building blocks. To really get a handle on carbs, we've got to start from the ground up. What even is a carbohydrate at its core?
Here it is, the core definition. If you're studying, there are two things to really lock in your brain here. First, 4 kilocalories per gram. That's its energy value, same as protein. And second, this word, monosaccharide. It's just the sciencey name for the single basic unit of any carb. Think of it like a single Lego brick.
And like we just teased, these little bricks do way more than just give you energy. Yeah, they're our #1 fuel source for things like sprinting or lifting heavy, but they also form these little antennas on our cells called glycoproteins, and that is literally what determines if you have A, B, or O blood type. How cool is that? They're also crucial for keeping our joints moving smoothly, so they're both fuel and building material.
Okay, so now let's see how those single bricks, those monosaccharides, come together to build bigger things. This is where we get the huge difference between simple and complex carbs. It's all about how they're built.
So it really just comes down to how many bricks you're stacking. One single brick, a monosaccharide, is something like glucose. You stick 2 of them together, you get a disaccharide. That's like sucrose, which is just regular table sugar. And when you link a whole bunch of them together in a big long chain, you get a polysaccharide. Think starch in potatoes or bread.
Now this is where it gets really fascinating. Seriously, look at this. Starch and cellulose are both just long chains of glucose, the exact same brick. But a tiny little change in how those bricks are linked together changes everything. Our bodies have the right tools to break the bonds in starch and get energy, but we absolutely cannot break the bonds in cellulose. So it just passes through us as fiber. One little structural tweak, a huge nutritional difference. Definitely a key concept to remember.
You know, that difference in how we digest carbs leads us right into our next topic, the glycemic index. This is all about measuring how fast our body turns different carbs into blood sugar once we eat them. The glycemic index, or GI, is pretty much a speed rating for carbohydrates. It's a scale that shows you how quickly a food spikes your blood sugar. We use pure glucose as the benchmark, setting it at 100. So high GI foods, like white bread, cause a really fast, high spike. But low GI foods, like lentils, cause a much slower, more gentle rise.
But this is where things can get a little tricky, right? Let me throw you a curveball. Based on that definition, you might think high GI foods are always bad. Well, get this. Watermelon has a pretty high GI, sitting around 70.
And this leads to a super common point of confusion. If watermelon digests so fast, does that mean it's a no-go if you're trying to keep your blood sugar stable? Well, not exactly.
And here is why. The glycemic index on its own doesn't tell the whole story. We also need to look at something called the glycemic load, or GL. This is way more practical because it looks at both the speed of the carbs and the amount of carbs you're actually eating in a serving. So yeah, watermelon's carbs are fast, but because a slice is mostly water, there are actually very few carbs in there. So its total impact on your blood sugar, its glycemic load, is actually really low.
So who's in charge of managing all this? Well, it's these 2 key hormones working as a team. When your blood sugar goes up after you eat, your pancreas sends out insulin. Insulin is basically the key that unlocks your cells and lets the glucose in. But when your blood sugar drops too low, it sends out glucagon, which tells your liver, hey, release some of that stored up glucose. It's this beautiful, constant balancing act.
Okay, let's circle back to that really special carb we talked about earlier, the one our bodies literally cannot break down for energy. I'm talking about fiber. And the main thing to remember here is that since we can't digest it, it has 0 calories. But that doesn't mean it's not doing incredibly important work.
Now, not all fiber is created equal. For your exam, you'll want to know the 2 main types. Soluble fiber dissolves in water and forms a kind of gel.
If you've ever made oatmeal, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This type is awesome for your heart. Then you have insoluble fiber. This stuff doesn't dissolve. Think of it more like a scrub brush for your digestive system, just keeping everything moving along nicely. Different jobs, but we absolutely need both.
Let's talk about another interesting twist in carb digestion. You probably think of lactose intolerance as some kind of allergy or disorder, right? But this statement is actually true. For most of human history, and for the vast majority of adults on the planet today, the ability to digest milk sugar, lactose, just fades away after we're babies.
And the numbers here are just wild. The ability to digest lactose as an adult is actually a genetic mutation. It's most common in people whose ancestors have a long history of dairy farming. This is a perfect example of what we call nutrigenomics, how our DNA, shaped by what our ancestors ate thousands of years ago, affects how we process the exact same food today.
All right, let's make this super practical. In this last section, we are putting on our detective hats. We're going to use everything we've just learned to decode a real-world nutrition label. This is a skill you can use every single day.
So here's the puzzle. A nutrition label will tell you total carbohydrates, dietary fiber, and total sugars. But wait a minute, where's the starch? You know, that complex carb that gives us sustained energy? It's hidden. You actually have to do a tiny bit of math to find it.
Okay, ready? Let's walk through it together. Step 1. You just start with that big number at the top, total carbohydrates. On our example label, that's 66 grams. Easy enough.
Next, from that total, we're going to subtract the parts we can't digest. So that's the 6 grams of dietary fiber. We take that away.
And finally, we subtract the simple sugars, which are listed here as 26 grams. And what are we left with? Boom! 34 grams. That is our hidden starch content. The formula is simple, right? Total carbs minus fiber minus sugars equals starch. Now you know how to find it on any label out there.
And there you have it. We've gone from a single little sugar brick all the way to decoding a food label. We've seen how carbs are built, what they do, and how they affect our bodies every single day. So the final question really is for you. Now that you understand the code, how are you going to use it? Whether it's to absolutely ace that exam or just to build a healthier you, the power is totally in your hands.